Don't think about that, Jim. You just dies, and that's that. Quite often, though, not as quick as people think, Jim.
Why not?
Well, you take my case, as it were.
Behind the glamour and glitter of Hollywood's golden age lurked a man whose charm masked a sinister darkness. Fans adored him, co-stars feared him, and his past hid secrets so disturbing they'd ruin his legacy forever. Imagine a backlot at sunrise. Paint dries on cardboard mansions while electricians coil cable along streets that only exist from one angle. A studio cop waves you through with a half salute, and every door you pass bears a name that has not yet hardened into legend. This is the hour when Hollywood looks honest. Before the lights, before the lines, before the money. Now picture the same street at midnight. No extras, no laughter. A shade crosses behind a curtain. A voice rises, then drops, and a promise is made in a whisper that will never appear in a memo. This is the hour when Hollywood becomes itself. Secrets traded for power. Silence traded for safety. Charm traded for protection. Our story lives between those 2 hours. It is the story of how a man can be adored on screen and feared off it. How a studio could polish a reputation so bright that even the ugliest facts would not stick. The audience remembered the smile. Colleagues remembered the bruise. Tonight we sort memory from myth and ask plainly a question most fans avoid. Who was the most evil actor of Hollywood's golden age? Before we begin, a promise and a boundary. We will speak clearly about what is documented, what is sworn, and what is alleged in multiple biographies and first-person accounts. Old Hollywood is a hall of mirrors. You deserve a steady hand on your shoulder as we walk. The Golden Age did not run on glamour alone. It ran on contracts that owned people from their hairline to their ankles. Studios controlled schedules, images, romances, and the cleanup after nights that would have made page 1 if the press agents had not earned their pay. Private detectives shadowed troublesome stories. Friendly lawyers dialed midnight numbers. Editors cut film like surgeons, while publicists cut newspapers like magicians. If a star made a mess, the studio cleaned it. If a star was the mess, the studio made him into a myth. So why use the word evil? Because behind that machinery, there were choices. Some men used the machine to protect their worst impulses, to harm because they could, and to keep doing it because no one with power told them to stop. Evil is a heavy word. Sometimes it is the only honest one. We proceed like investigators. 3 case files, 3 different men, 3 kinds of darkness. As you listen, keep your own private tally. Notice when your affection for a performance tries to argue with a fact. Notice when a detail clings to you long after the story moves on. Begin with a man the public adored for his warmth. On screen, he was a big-limbed comfort, a working man's hero with a scowl that softened into a grin. He filled a frame the way an old stove fills a kitchen, all heat and home. Children adored him. Parents trusted him. Studios sold him as proof that decency wears overalls and gets the job done without complaint. Off-screen, the weather changed. People who worked beside him describe a different climate entirely. A child actor wrote that the big man hoarded attention like a jealous cat, spoiling hard-won takes with crude asides designed to pull focus back to himself. Not once, not twice. Enough times that a director begged him to stop. Extras recalled being shouldered aside. The crew remembered lines crossed that would have ended another man's contract. Younger performers learned to shrink when he swaggered into a room. He did not like being upstaged. He took from a scene what did not belong to him. He climbed ladders made from other people's time and effort. Then came whispers around a death that stunned the industry. A famous funny man gone after a night of drink and fists. The official story listed complications from alcohol. The city turned the page. But gossip colonized the margins. Biographers repeated a rumor that the beloved tough guy had been there, perhaps more than there, that his hands had done more than applaud. No charges followed. The studio sent him away for a while, a trip that looked like a vacation and felt like exile. When he returned, the machine whirred back to life. The myth marched on. The rumor outlived everyone in it. Set that file down and open a second. This one wears a charm like a cape, a swashbuckler with eyes that danced and a smile that dared you not to trust it. He made danger look like a gentleman's trick. Swords, sails, silk. Audiences forgave his characters their sins because the actor made wickedness feel like a weekend mischief that vanishes by Monday morning. Then a headline hit like a brick tossed through glass. Two young women. Words that sting even 70 years later. Statutory, assault, a courtroom thick with spectators and a nation of listeners. The law did its work in public. The jury acquitted him. He walked out smiling into the sunlight. Does an acquittal erase a story? In the eyes of the law, yes. In the ears of the public, rarely. He kept acting. He kept drinking. He kept chasing shocks, as if thrills were currency that had to be spent to stay solvent. Biographers argued over politics he flirted with, friends he courted, the edge he never stopped skating. Defenders called those claims slander. You can read a dozen books and gather a dozen truths. What you cannot do is pretend the trial was a rumor. It was not. It lives in the grain of his films, whether you want it there or not. Do not answer yet, but hold the question. What is the difference between appetite and evil, between reckless and criminal, between a man you should not trust and a man the system taught to believe that rules were meant for other people? Open the third file. He had the face of a blueprint, every angle camera ready. A walk that said, "I own the room," without needing proof. Studios sold him as the fantasy of what men wanted to be and what women wanted to change. He pretended to love for a living. He pretended to be harmless, even better. Behind the posters, the air thickens. An on-set entanglement that was no romance at all. A young actress whose life was scheduled by men in offices. A pregnancy. A long train ride. A child who vanished into adoption forms, later reappearing as a charity case with a new name. For decades, the mother said little. In later years, she found language that did not exist when she was young. And she described the encounter not as a dalliance, but as force. She carried that winter in silence because silence was how a woman survived a studio that owned her livelihood. Other rumors trail behind him. A late-night drive that ended badly. The call to the studio before the call to the police. A story that looked different in the morning paper than it did under the streetlights. Again, no sworn confession exists. Again, the myth prevailed. Again, new films arrived to wash old questions from public minds. If your pencil has grown dull, good. The Golden Age produced brilliant work and a culture that taught the awful to feel inevitable and the inevitable to feel invisible. Evil thrives in systems like that. It prefers rooms where everyone is busy, sleep is rare, and the next scene must be shot before lunch. To understand how this could happen, follow the money into the back office. Studios kept private detectives on retainer. Men who specialized in making trouble disappear. They cultivated friendly police chiefs who enjoyed premieres, hospital administrators who valued donations, columnists who traded kindness for access, and lawyers who knew which judges answered midnight calls. Publicists planted decoy stories, romance today, feud tomorrow, a charming anecdote in the weekend magazine, so that yesterday's pain could vanish under tomorrow's laugh. Women who spoke were labeled hysterical or difficult. Men who spoke were labeled bitter until a studio needed them again. If a star broke a law, executives argued that the public needed him more than the court did. Too often, it worked. So why ask for one name at all? Because responsibility is not a chorus. It begins with one person choosing to do harm, choosing again, and recruiting the machine to cushion the fall. To weigh the word evil, you must look for intent, pattern, and protection. Did he harm on purpose? Did he keep going? Did he use the system to stay safe while he did it? The first file, the big limb charmer, reads like sabotage disguised as friendliness. Sabotage is a choice. Intimidation is a choice. If even a shard of the whispered violence around that fatal night holds truth, then anger was not simply a mood, it was a tool. The second file, the matchstick hero, stands under the bright light of a courtroom and the gray light of everything that came after. Appetite is not a crime, but an appetite taught to ignore can turn a person into a danger that law cannot always measure. The third file, the smiling king, sits in the fog where consent is muddied on purpose. That is where studios did their grimmest work, turning coercion into romance and paperwork into absolution. Now pull back, not to spare nerves, but to sharpen focus. Think of a young actor signing a studio contract in a small white office. 6 pictures. Heavy penalties for refusing roles. A morality clause so vague it could be bent into any shape management needed. Now imagine a second document the actor never sees, listing the names of the safety net, the police chief who likes premieres, the hospital administrator who knows which files to seal, the kind columnist with a private retainer, and the lawyer who can transform a disaster into a misunderstanding by breakfast. The actor does not read it. He will live inside it. Who slid that second document across a desk for the big friendly star when reporters began sniffing around a death. Who used it after the swashbuckler's trial to polish a legend back to market shine. Who relied on it when the king with the smile smiled too wide and might have been seen. When you can answer that, you are halfway to our conclusion. Stories like this risk becoming a parade of sins. That is not our aim. The goal is to place you in the rooms where decisions were made and to let you feel the gravity there. A publicist looks over the wire copy and says, "Not this week. We will float the romance on Friday." A producer flips through stills, stops at the one where the big star looks like a father, not a fighter, and says, "That one on the front. Lead with a grin." A fixer dials a number with the kind of familiarity that means he has done this before. The people in these rooms never star in the movies, but sometimes they are the authors of the real story. If you feel a pull to forgive for the sake of your favorite films, notice that too. Nostalgia is persuasive. It speaks in music and soft light. It lets you believe that nothing bad could happen in a world that looks that beautiful. The truth is less comforting and more useful. Beauty can be honest in one direction and a lie in another. You can love a film and still tell the truth about the people who made it. That is not betrayal. That is adulthood. Return to the first file for a moment and consider how contradictions can live inside one person. A man who can make a child laugh on set can also teach that child to distrust anyone who laughs with him. A man who can put an audience at ease can also put his colleagues on edge the moment the camera stops. If kindness is only present when the lens is open, is it kindness or costume? If cruelty is a habit everyone learns to work around, is it temperament or choice? Return to the second file and consider how the law and truth diverge. A courtroom requires certainty beyond doubt. Life often offers only a chorus of credible voices and a pattern that refuses to be dismissed. An acquittal can be both the right legal result and the wrong moral lesson. It can tell a man that he will always be believed because he was believed once. It can tell a studio that profit will always outvote pain. Neither message ages well. Return to the third file and consider how silence is manufactured. A young woman with a career that depends on her being agreeable learns how to be agreeable even when her body says otherwise. Her bosses tell themselves that what she loses is private, that what the public gains is larger, that art is worth the cost. The arithmetic is obscene. It was common. It is less common now, but the logic lingers where power collects. You may have noticed that we have not yet said the names out loud. That is on purpose, not to play games, but to slow the room. You know these faces. You have seen them 100 times. A little anticipation is respectful when dealing with lives that still echo through living rooms. It keeps us careful. It prevents us from turning pain into a product. The reveal will not arrive as a single name thrown like a stone. It will arrive with a timeline and a set of patterns that make the verdict feel like the only honest conclusion. You do not have to agree. Disagreement is healthy in history. It means you are weighing, not merely reacting. What matters is that when we name the actor most deserving of the title, we show our worth. That is how you separate truth from the kind of rumor that flatters your prior beliefs. Here is where the trail heats up. A bar where a storm had to be made to look like a stumble. A sudden trip arranged with the speed only a studio can manage. A headline that should have lasted months softened into a footnote. A courtroom where the verdict did not cure the culture that produced the charges. A sealed file that a mother could not open for decades. These are not separate stories. They are the same story seen through different windows. Begin where the rumor refuses to die. Los Angeles, a nightclub with a room full of chatter that can turn dangerous on a dime. A comedian everyone knows is at a table with men who do not laugh easily. Drinks arrive, words tilt, bodies shift. A shove turns into a tangle. The room pauses, then pretends it did not see. Later that night, the comedian goes home, lies down, and does not wake. The morning paper chooses softer words. Complications, alcohol, a life closed by a period and not a description. There are, however, bruises. Friends whisper about a beating. Names start to float. A studio fixer tells a columnist to pick a different column. One name draws the eye in a way the others do not. He is too famous for people to accept the possibility. He is too beloved on screen for the picture to make sense. He is sent out of town on short notice. It looks like a vacation. It feels like a disappearance. You know this file already because you met him in Part 1. The man with the broad grin and the working man's scowl. The man whose arms looked safe in posters and whose presence could turn a set brittle when the camera stopped. The rumors around that night never found a courtroom. They did not need one to survive. They lived in biographies, in quiet confessions from people who worked within reach of those arms, in the way a certain studio handled emergencies that were not supposed to be called crimes. If you have ever wondered why this rumor endures when so many others fade, consider that rumors with nothing to feed on collapse. This one kept finding new air. Before we put a name to the file, step back to see the pattern. Evil is not a single act. It is a habit of choosing yourself at the cost of others and recruiting your environment to protect that choice. Short tempers are ordinary. So are blind spots and late apologies. What we are weighing here is different. It is the steady application of harm. It is cruel when the audience is gone. It is a readiness to intimidate the weak and a willingness to let the machine clean the mess. Now, name the man. Wallace Beery. For millions of ticket buyers, he was the big heart in rough clothes, the bear who could carry a scene without lifting his voice, the kind of star audiences trusted without interrogating why. He won an Academy Award for The Champ. He played side by side with a boy whose tears broke the country in two. He could make a hard lesson feel like a hug. He could be, in the best sense, dear. That was the surface. Underneath, the stories you seldom find on the lobby cards make a different portrait. A young Jackie Cooper remembered how Beery pulled focus from a child the camera loved. He remembered sly little wounds between takes, jokes timed to ruin hard-won emotion, the subtle ways an older man can teach a younger performer to doubt his own instincts. Other performers told versions of the same story. He resented being upstaged. He made set life small for those who threatened his place in the frame. When the call was for kindness, he could perform it with skill. When the camera rested, the performance often rested too. There is a darker account that does not rely on set gossip or studio spin. Gloria Swanson married young, married unwisely, and later wrote of a wedding night that felt more like a crime scene than a honeymoon. She wrote of a violation. She wrote of a pregnancy ended by a cruel method that she believed had been forced on her. She wrote of a man who used her body as if it were a contract clause. Those pages were not gossip. They were a survivor's document. Her account has been contested by those who prefer their legends smooth. It remains part of the record she left behind. Return to that nightclub where the comedian died. Ted Healy was a man many owed laughs to and few truly liked. The city accepted an official cause that put the blame on his own appetites. The bruises invited doubt. The whispers placed Beery in that room with two other men known for hard edges and strong connections. The studio, powerful then in a way that is hard to imagine now, had every incentive to keep its asset clean. It had the means to make inconvenient facts fade. He left for Europe. He came back to work. The rumors stayed. What makes Beery the most credible candidate for the title we promised to decide is not one story in isolation. It is the way the stories rhyme. Petty cruelty toward colleagues weaker than him. Physical intimidation when charm failed. An alleged assault told by a woman who had more to lose than to gain by telling it. A death surrounded by contradictions and followed by a getaway packaged as a holiday. A studio apparatus that seemed to bend to fit the contours of his trouble and spring back only when he needed a bankable welcome. Compare him to the swashbuckler who stood trial. Errol Flynn faced the full light of a courtroom. The jury acquitted. His life carried the mark of that trial forever, and so did his legend. He was, by every account, reckless. He broke rules with an abandon that reads as entitlement and danger in equal measure. Yet the public process that judged him did not find proof beyond doubt. You can choose to believe those girls. You can choose to believe the verdict. You can stand in the uncomfortable middle. Wherever you stand, the act of public reckoning separates him from the quiet protections that shadowed Beery. Compare him to the king of smiles whose private life still sparks arguments in family living rooms when old films are on. Clark Gable left behind a trail of complicated truths, including a child given up and a woman who later described an encounter not as romance, but as force. That story lives in testimony surrounding adoption records, in the way a studio managed a scandal by managing a life. Gable remains beloved because he remains complicated on screen and off. It is fair to see him as a man who benefited from a system tilted in his favor at the cost of people with less power. It is also fair to understand that his public record and private allegations do not give you the same pattern of petty calculated meanness that marks Beery. With Beery, the pattern is the point. It is not a single outburst or an isolated bad night. It is a stack of accounts from co-stars and crew who had no reason to agree on a fiction. It is the way a child's memory can still smell the tobacco and hear the joke timed to destroy his own best work. It is a woman's account of a marriage that left scars invisible to the camera and loud in the quiet of a bedroom decades later. It is a city's rumor about a beating that ended a life, amplified by a studio response that looks precisely like the kind of response a studio makes when it believes its business is at risk. You do not need a confession to see a shape. You can feel the pressure of the system in Beery's favor. The studio could call a judge, and the judge would answer. The fixer could call a columnist, and the column would soften. The publicity department could plant a romance to crowd out a bruise. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is the daily practice of a company that has more money than most cities and more influence than most governments. The system served many men who needed serving. It served him with special vigor because he made money and looked like decency on screen. Does naming him most evil risk turning a complicated industry into a simple morality play? Only if you refuse to see the frame around the face. The Golden Age created and protected monsters and saints and 1,000 shades between. The point of naming Beery is not to let everyone else off the hook. It is to be accurate about a degree of harm and a habit of protection that rise above the noise. There is another reason the choice matters. Stories are how we teach ourselves who we are. When a culture says, "This is a hero," and then refuses to revise the definition when ugly facts pile up, it trains people to doubt their own eyes. It trains colleagues to swallow their fear. It tells children to keep working while a bully laughs. No one deserves a legend that requires that kind of silence to stand. The question that follows is the one you have been carrying since we started. What do you do with his films now? The champ still makes eyes sting. Min and Bill still move that old part of the heart that believes in second chances. You do not have to throw them away to tell the truth. You can let them be what they are and let him be what he was. You can say to yourself, the work belongs to everyone who made it, not just to the man with top billing. You can watch and remember who paid for that scene with a memory they could not return to the prop master when the day wrapped. There is a danger in the word evil. It can let us pretend that one man carried all the darkness so the rest of us can stay clean. That is never true. Evil likes help. It is like assistants who look at their shoes. It likes audiences who prefer to keep their afternoons bright and uncomplicated. It likes the fog of nostalgia because fog blurs edges. Naming Beery is not an absolution for anyone else. It is an anchor point for a map that includes fixers and executives and columnists who learned how to move pain off the front page. At the end of any investigation worth its time, you should be left with more than a verdict. You should be left with better questions. How do you build systems that make it harder to hide harm behind a grin? How do you build cultures that reward the crew member who speaks up before the publicist has to find a new headline? How do you train audiences to love art without becoming loyal to a lie? Look again at that nightclub. It is smaller now that everyone in it is gone. The rumor is louder than the room. The names are larger than the space could hold. The truth is that no one can replay that night and prove the moment when a life could have been saved by a different choice. The best we can do is tell the full story of the choices that were made before and after. Beery made choices. His colleagues remember many of them. The studio made choices. The machine remembers its own methods even when it pretends it forgot. We can choose what to remember now. And look again at a set where a boy tries to cry on cue and does, and then loses the moment to a joke that did not need to be told. In that small cruelty, you can hear the large ones. You can hear the entitlement that speaks over a smaller voice because it can. You can hear the arrogance that trusts a studio to protect the bully, so the picture can finish on time. Evil often looks like that. It looks petty up close and grand in the aggregate. In naming Wallace Beery as Hollywood's most evil actor of the Golden Age, we are not pretending to be a court. We are not sentencing a ghost. We are placing a marker at the intersection of pattern and power. We are saying that the charm the public adored did not live in the rooms where his colleagues did their work and their suffering. We are saying that the system that paid him also paid to keep certain truths off the books. We are saying that the rumor around a death should never have had a studio travel docket attached to it. If you feel a mix of anger and sadness and the odd pang of betrayal, that is what good history does. It takes the posters down from the bedroom wall only to hang up something more honest in the living room. You still get to keep the films, the performances, the craft. You do not have to keep the myth. You can talk about the truth. You can push back when nostalgia tries to dress a man in virtues he did not live. The golden age is over. The rooms are still here. They have new names and new rules and cameras that never stop. The best way to honor what film can be is to keep learning from what it was. A story like this asks for attention, not revenge. It asks for care, not cancellation. It asks for the courage to say a name out loud when the polite thing would be to pick another subject. We stop where we began, between dawn and midnight, on a lot where legends were manufactured to fit the needs of the day. The sunrise version of Hollywood is beautiful because it is clean. The midnight version is honest because it is not. The truth lives between them. So do we. If this deep dive helped you see old Hollywood clearly, subscribe, share with a friend, and comment your verdict. Which name would you choose and why? New investigations every week.